So yesterday we were talking about adding different types of doughs into your sourdough repertoire. Most people already have a lean dough in their repertoire, which is their, classic water, flour, salt sourdough starter recipe. Very crusty on the outside, very chewy in the middle type of bread. Let's add an enriched dough into your sourdough repertoire. So you can use this dough for other things where you might not want that really, really chewy, crispy texture. You might want something that's a little more fluffy and soft. So this recipe is going to add milk, eggs, butter into the equation and some sugar, and it's going to make a really, really nice, soft and fluffy bread. I'm going to start with 150 grams of milk. Any milk will do, whatever you have on hand. I did just barely warm this up because it was straight out of the fridge. I don't want it to be cold, but I also don't want it to be as warm as it would be if I was making a commercially produced yeast bread, like if I was using dried yeast from the grocery store. I am still using starter for this, so I don't want it to be super warm. Somewhere between like 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or like 29 to 32 degrees Celsius. We're also going to add to this about 150 grams of our active sourdough starter. Millie's super, super active and strong this morning. I'm going to just throw her in here. It's going to use up most of my jar. If you're new here, I keep my starter super, super small. I only feed what I need to make dough, and then I keep scrapings in my jar for my next feedings. This is what I have left. This is all the starter I have at home, but this is plenty. This will keep it going for a very, very long time. I'm gonna break my starter up in the milk, and then I'll start adding in my other ingredients. Okay, I'm gonna throw my flour on top here. Really, the order of these doesn't matter. This is kind of the order I like to do it just for ease of mixing. But I need about 510 grams of all-purpose flour. We're going to use all-purpose flour because we don't want a ton of chew in this, and bread flour has more protein, which equals more gluten, and that equals more chewiness. So we're going to use AP flour, 510 grams, and then I'm going to throw my salt on top of here. We need about 10 grams of salt as well, which would be about 2 teaspoons. And we are going to go ahead and add butter on top of this. The butter can be slightly melted or it can be just room temperature, whatever you have. If you already have it sitting out at room temperature, that's perfect. But if you forgot to take it out, just melt it a little bit. That's totally fine. We need 75 grams, which is about a third cup. And then we're going to add some sugar in here. We're going to add about 100 grams of sugar and then 2 eggs. I think that's it. Is that it? I think that's it. And our 2 eggs. Precious, precious eggs. They're so expensive right now. I'm trying not to use them too often. When we first opened my baking school, a case of 15 dozen eggs was about $13. It is currently like $137. That is how expensive eggs have become in the US. I'm just gonna get in here with my spatula to start, just like I would any other dough. Once it feels like I can't do all that much more with my spatula, I am gonna get in here with my hand and do kind of like pinching and squeezing to get everything hydrated. But I'm actually gonna need this dough. This is not a high hydration dough the way a lot of our lean dough recipes are, where you would do stretch and folds. This dough is a lower hydration dough, but it has all the addition of all that fat with the butter and the eggs and the milk, and it's still gonna be really, really nice and fluffy. So we don't need it to be high hydration. We're actually going to knead this. You can knead it by hand, or you could knead it with your stand mixer, with your dough hook. You wanna go on a moderate speed. I usually use a 4-speed on my KitchenAid if I'm gonna use it. But I pretty much always hand knead things unless I'm making a really large batch. So I'm just getting in here and just kind of like squeezing and pinching, getting everything incorporated. Once your dough is kind of looking like this, it's kind of a rough, shaggy, or as the British like to say, craggy dough. I'm gonna just kind of clean my hands off a little bit so that the kneading process will be a little bit easier. I don't like to start the kneading process with sticky hands, because if your hands are sticky, the dough will feel stickier than it is, and you're gonna think you need to keep adding more and more and more flour. When you have all of this going on, just sprinkle some flour on your hands and then kind of like firmly rub them together like you are washing your hands, and that will get a lot of that stickiness off, and it will make the dough a lot easier to handle. Okay, I am going to lightly flour my work surface here, and then I'm gonna get all this dough out here, and I'm gonna knead this for about 8 to 10 minutes. you can't overdo this. People are always worried about over kneading. If you're kneading by hand, you're not going to over knead. A sourdough bread or a traditional commercially produced yeast dough, you're not going to over knead it. You're much more at risk of under kneading than over kneading. So when I knead bread, I am using the heel of my hand to push it away from me. I'm using the tips of my fingers to bring it back. And I just repeat that process over and over again. I don't want to be tearing my dough, so I'm not like stretching it out in a way that tears it, because I'm not trying to tear our gluten strands that are forming. I'm trying to build the strength in them. So if I'm pushing it too much, or if I'm like kind of pulling it and tearing it, that's kind of defeating the purpose. So I'm just pushing, folding, pushing, folding. If the dough starts feeling unmanageably sticky, I am going to add a little bit more flour. But the dough should feel really, really, really nice and moist. I know it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but I don't think I'm really going to need to add more flour to this. We'll see. Sometimes you get into it and then you do realize you need a little bit more. But it's really, really nice and tacky, super, super moist. I want to keep it as moist as I can. All right, so I'm going to knead this for about 8 minutes. I'll be back. Okay, it has been about 8 minutes. I want you to see the texture of this dough. It's beautiful, it's soft, it's super moist, it's silky, it's smooth, it's got some springiness to it. I've built that gluten strength in it, which means it is good to go now for its bulk fermentation. Now, if I'm gonna add inclusions into this, I like to do it right before shaping. So I'll show you. I'm gonna make a separate video about, I don't even know what inclusions I'm going to add yet, but I like to use a dough like this for sweet inclusions rather than an enriched, or rather than a lean dough, because I don't know, I just think a sweet bread, to me, a sweet bread, I associate with like a softer bread, and also a dough that's sweet. This has some sugar in it. The dough's not overly sweet. You could reduce the amount of sugar or actually even leave it out completely when you make this dough if you wanted to use it for a savory application. Now, enriched doughs do not rise as quickly as lean doughs. When we start adding sugar and fat into the equation, it just slows fermentation down. So I think this is probably going to take about 8 hours. And if your house is really cold, it could even take up to like 10 hours. It's early morning here in Chicago. I'm going to take this to work with me because I got to teach tonight. So I'll take it with me and then I'll shape it and add some inclusions before class tonight. And I'll make a video showing you what I'm going to do with it. But I do my inclusions right before shaping. So I'll almost kind of like, I'll show you. Almost kind of laminate them in, but then I'll let it rest for about 15 minutes after I add the inclusions, and then I'll do my final shape. So, yeah, I got to think about what I'm going to put in it. Any suggestions, leave them in the comments. Okay, here's your enriched sourdough dough. Now you have another option. Enjoy. Bye.